What is up? Welcome back into the Danger Sports Podcast. Today, we're going to have a lot to talk about. Different head coaching and assistant coaching jobs that are come available and moves that have been made there, as well as playoff scenarios and how Week 18 played out. So, I'm going to be telling you my picks for Week 18, and I'm going to be telling you the results that go along with them and how I did overall. So in Week 18, the first game we're going to be talking about is the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Baltimore Ravens. I had the Steelers winning, had that correct. The Steelers won 17-10 over the Ravens. Mason Rudolph threw out a 71-yard touchdown to George Pickens to make it to the playoffs. Since the Jaguars lost to the Titans, the Steelers got into the playoffs as the 7th seed and will play against the Buffalo Bills. Second game we're going to be talking about is the Texans and the Colts game that happened on Saturday night on ESPN. The Texans needed a win to get in, and they needed a Jags loss to clinch the division. And indeed, both of those things happened, so the Texans will be the 4 seed in the playoffs. Tyler Goodson drops a wide open first down that would have gotten them inside the 10, wide open. He probably could have had a chance to score, but I don't think he would have. If he would have caught that, I think they probably would have ended up winning. They had the ball at the one last drive, and they weren't able to execute as Tyler Goodson with the wide open drop. In my mind, they should have put Jonathan Taylor in that situation to catch that. Tyler Goodson isn't that good compared to him, so I don't really understand that personnel decision, but I am now 2 for 2 on my picks after that one. The next game we're going to talk about is the Bears and the Packers. I had the Bears winning. That was incorrect. The Packers won 17-9. Jordan Love made it look easy. Had 5 incompletions the entire game. Bears defense wasn't very much resistant to him, although they had Jalen Johnson out, who is one of the best corners in the league this year, who is a pending free agent. They beat the Bears for the 10th straight time and will get a matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. And lots of stuff with the coaching vacancies are going to be talked about with the Bears coming up. Lots of decisions have been made. Some are to be made. The Bucs have beat the Panthers 9-0, clinched the NFC South, and are winning because it's the Panthers. The Panthers are horrible, and they're 2-15 now. I was pretty right on that pick. I had them, and I'm 3 for my first 4, so I'm feeling pretty good so far. The Browns lost to the Bengals 31-14. The Browns rested their starters. They will have them back next week in their game against the Texans, which should be a huge game, obviously, since it's the playoffs. But the Bengals had players out as well. Not as many as the Browns with them sitting their starters, but both teams had their spots finalized, the Bengals being eliminated and the Browns having clinched the 5th seed in the AFC. So I'm now 4 for 5. The Lions beat the Vikings 30-20, where they played all their starters because they had a chance to make the 2nd seed, assuming an Eagles and a Cowboys loss, which would put them in a matchup against the Packers once again. But they actually will play the Rams in the next week of the playoffs, as they have lots of question marks in their secondary. Their secondary was like, you get a touchdown, you get a touchdown, you get a touchdown. They're all bombs. Everybody gets a touchdown. And it was just like Oprah out there. It was just free touchdowns for their opponent. Nick Mullins having 600 yards. Actually, no, 800 yards in 2 games against the Lions. Unreal, because they just couldn't stop anything. The concern in the first time they played the Lions was the interceptions. But in the second game, there wasn't any, which is why this game was closer than it was the first time around. The quarterback situation is interesting for the Vikings, as they have an incision if they're going to bring back Kirk Cousins. He's a free agent next year. Or are they going to draft a guy with their first-round pick? I think it's going to be a conversation that takes a minute. with Kirk Cousins. I think he'll probably be back, but there's a chance that maybe they also draft a quarterback. There's lots of scenarios that could play out for them. The Jets beat the Patriots 17-3, and this could have been Bill Belichick's last game as a Patriot and maybe even as a coach. There has been no decision there yet, but it seems like it's still a possibility. Not guaranteed yet, but there's a chance that he could be gone next year. The Patriots will have a chance to draft a quarterback next year, picking third. They could either trade up or they could do something and they could just pick third, pick a guy at 3. It could be interesting to see how that plays out, how it goes up all the way until the draft in April. It's going to be a decision to be made, and it's going to be taking a minute, I would assume, at least, for them to make a decision. The Saints beat the Falcons 48-17. Falcons, this was your last chance to keep Arthur Smith. If you would have won, and if you got a lucky win by the Panthers over the Bucks, you guys would be the division winners. But that didn't happen. In fact, neither of those things happened. Arthur Smith will be talked about later with the coaching that we're going to be talking about later. Lastly, we're going to be talking about the Rams and the 49ers. The Rams won 21-20. Both teams used their backups, including backup quarterbacks. More backups were used by the Niners. Puka Nacua broke the record for receptions and yards as a rookie, which I find very incredible since he was a 5th-round pick out of BYU. Rams win and get the 6th seed in the playoffs and will play the Lions in a storyline-filled matchup. So overall, I went 6-3 out of my picks. So I'm feeling really confident, and I think I did a good job. Let me know what you guys think, if I did well or not. For the upcoming wild cards, we will be talking about each matchup and how it can make an impact on the divisional round that comes up a week later. So the Browns and the Texans will face off. The Browns are 2.5-point favorites. The Texans won the division last week after a win over the Colts and the Jags loss over the Tennessee Titans. The storyline will be, will offense or defense play a bigger role in this game? The Texans need the game to be a higher scoring game. The Browns need this to be a low scoring game because the Texans have a dominant offense and the Browns have a dominant defense. So I think whatever way this game goes, if it's low scoring, it'll be a Browns game. If it's a high scoring game, it'll be a Texans game with their offense being better, in my opinion, than the Browns. So in that, I have the Texans winning in a close one. It could be a blowout. I don't see it being a blowout, but I think it's going to be a close game. Lots of stuff to play for. There's not going to be very many blowouts in the playoffs, especially in a matchup like this that if teams are very evenly matched. Dolphins will play at the Chiefs. Kansas City is a 4.5-point favorite going into this round. The Dolphins coming off a loss against the Bills that if they would have won, they would have been in a situation where they could have won the division and clinched the 2nd seed in the AFC, but they didn't, and they will be playing as the 6th seed against the Chiefs as the 3 seed. These teams will be playing, and the Chiefs are coming off of a week where Mahomes rested in Week 18, and lots to play for. Should be a really good game. I would expect it to be high scoring, and in that, I think Patrick Mahomes is the better quarterback, so you give the edge to the Chiefs. That's why I'm picking the Chiefs here. The Steelers play the Bills, who are obviously heavily favored because the Steelers are using Mason freaking Rudolph, who is a bum. He's starting because Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky are both even worse. Either way, TJ Watt's going to be hurt. He's going to be out this week. The Bills won the division last week against the Dolphins, as we discussed in the last matchup. And I've got the Bills at home. They're the better team, even with Watt I think I'd still pick the Bills. So I'm still going to pick the Bills. In the NFC, the Packers will play the Cowboys, who are at home 7.5-point favorites. The Packers won last week against the Bears and got a chance to make the playoffs, and they did. And Cowboys won the NFC East last week after a win against the Commanders and an Eagles loss to the Giants. So I'm going to go with Dallas. I think they have a better roster, better quarterback, better receiving core. You name it. Position-wise, they're almost better everywhere. I think I have to go with the Cowboys. The Rams play the Lions, which is interesting, obviously, with Stafford going to Detroit to play his former team in the playoffs. This will show a lot of who really won that trade. I think it's going to be close. Sam Laporta is going to be out, which is huge. Actually, he's going to have an outside chance to play. Coach Dan Campbell said earlier this week, the Rams come off a week where Matthew Stafford was benched. Well, not benched. He was rested because they didn't have much to gain or lose with a win or a loss against the Niners. But they did win either way. I've got the upset. I've got the upset pick. I think the Rams win in a thriller. I think we're going to see some of the Lions. We're going to see a lot of the Lions old. We're going to see a little bit of that. I think we're going to see that this weekend. They need to get some experience in the playoffs. I think this is a perfect opportunity for them. They can either win and move on, but I think either way, even if they lose, it's valuable for them to get this playoff experience for years ahead. So I've got the Rams. The Bucks play against the Eagles. The Bucks play at home. Eagles are 3-point favorites. The Eagles have won only one of their last 6 games after being heavily favored to win the NFC East. They fall off in the second half of the year and have an interesting situation. It's going to be a lot to see. Are the Eagles back? Are they going to get a win for the first time since November? It's going to be close. I think the Eagles will win simply because they have a better roster, better team, better coaching. But I think there's a chance that it goes either way because the Eagles have been cold. And I think there's a chance that that plays out in favor of the Bucks at home. But I still have the Eagles. I think they're the better team. We got an extra for you guys. We're going to talk about some NFL coaching vacancies that have come up this week. Different decisions having to be made. Some guys being kept, some guys being fired. And we're going to start off with the Commanders, who made the obvious decision to fire their head coach in Ron Rivera, who had 4 seasons there and failed to get past the wild card round. They made it to the wild card round, I believe, twice. Not sure. But they couldn't get a quarterback right in development. They had bad quarterback play consistently, and they regressed throughout the 4 years that he was there. The Falcons also fired Arthur Smith, who we mentioned earlier, after 3 seasons. He had consistent bad usage of guys like Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts, 2 very good and valuable playmakers for their offense. And I think that really was the biggest reason for him to be fired, is that neither of those guys produced at a high level. High first round draft picks and very important pieces, showed promise, but they just didn't use them enough. Like, they performed well, they just didn't use the right guys at the right situations. And he also was horrible at developing Desmond Ridder, who had at least a little bit of potential, and he looked horrible this year. I mean, Taylor Heinicke played better than Desmond Ridder, which I found surprising and very hard to believe, quite honestly. And they said they were going to keep Arthur Smith, but barring a late season collapse, which indeed played out, causing him to be fired. The Chargers fired Brandon Staley a while ago, and he couldn't manage the game in the game, had bad defense. As a defensive coach, which is number one reason as a defensive coach to be fired is you're a defensive coach. You need to have a good defense if you're not an offensive coach. But they changed play callers many times. They couldn't figure out who was the right play caller for them. So much they just decided to get rid of Brandon Staley, which I think is the right decision. The Raiders have fired Josh McDaniels after only 2 seasons. He held back their offense, had not much for the quarterback to given, quite frankly, but he didn't really raise the bar for them, which is what you want as a head coach. You want your team to play good overall. They just didn't like him as a team, which is number one. It's a number one red flag. You can't have a coach and not like him. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. Generally, it's just not going to be a good thing. But the Titans also fired Mike Vrabel, which I found shocking. They made the AFC Championship with Ryan Tannehill made the AFC Championship before losing to the, what was it? I think it was the Chiefs. Either way, they just did the best they could. They didn't have a good quarterback the entire time he was there, but I thought they maximized everything they had to their advantage. I think he's definitely going to be head coach next year, potentially with the Patriots if they get rid of Bill Belichick, which is still up in the air because they haven't made a decision there yet. I don't know. Maybe they already did decide that they're going to keep him, but we'll see, I guess. Which leads me to the Panthers, who are 2-15, the worst record in the NFL. Fired Frank Reich mid-season really early on, and just overall an absolute disaster. Couldn't get anything behind or out of Bryce Young, the rookie number 1 pick. I think that it's not going to be the most enticing job to look at with the bad draft capital that they have upcoming, that they gave up last year. And overall, just an absolute disaster. He couldn't make anything out of what he had. Couldn't choose who was the right play caller. Went back and forth with his offensive coordinator. And he deserved to be fired. He shouldn't have been hired in the first place, quite honestly. Pete Carroll stepped down as the Seahawks coach, which I found surprising as I saw this on Wednesday. You may or may not be seeing this on Wednesday. It could be Thursday, Friday, you don't know. But I'm recording this on Friday. And I think number one reason he's old. And I think I may not be right, but I could be catching on to something here. He seems like he could be interested in another job. If he decides he wants to be a coach, he could be a coach at a lot of teams. He's old, which could push some teams away from him if he decides to be a coach next year. But if he doesn't, he could just be a coach turned into a person who is in the front office for the Seahawks and helping them potentially hire the new coach and make important moves for the team. The Bears kept Matt Eberflus, keep Matt Eberflus, but fire Luke Getsy, who just was horrible off the script. You often saw he had very good first drives of the game, scoring almost every game. After that, once teams adjust to the game plan, the play calling was bad. Really bad in 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, 4th and 2, 3rd and 2. You get it. The short distance deep into the series, really bad. Oftentimes tried to get a lot too fancy. And I think he has also slowed down the potential development of Justin Fields, which really is bad for the Bears because they still have a decision to make there. And that could have negatively affected their decision. And we'll see how that plays out, but who knows. Anyways, thank you guys for watching episode 2. We'll have episode 3 after next week. I'm sure we'll have some coordinators that have been hired, and who knows, maybe even some head coaches will be hired for some teams. But most importantly, we're going to be talking about what happened in a wild card of the playoffs, headed into the divisional round of the NFC and the AFC playoffs. We're going to reflect on my picks. Let me know what you guys think. Comment down below. Thank you guys for watching it regardless. And we will see you next week.